where a massive cleanup effort continues after a devastating tsunami last week. The first relief flights from Australia and New Zealand have arrived at Tonga's international airport, which just reopened. Other governments are also deploying ships and flights. Authorities say 2G communication service is back on, although restoring full internet services is likely to take a month or more. The country was hit by a tsunami following an undersea volcanic eruption last Saturday. More than 80% of the population has been affected. For more on the situation there, let's cross live to our correspondent Owen Poland in Auckland. So, Owen, it looks like international relief is a priority now. So Tonga's government earlier said drinking water is the priority among other demands. Tell us more if the situation is a little bit eased now.
That's absolutely right, Pan. Now, the Tongan government says that the availability of drinking water remains the #1 priority as the cleanup continues after last weekend's devastating eruption and tsunami. The New Zealand Defence Force says it expects to complete offloading 250,000 litres of water this afternoon from one of 2 Navy vessels that it has in Tonga. And one of those ships also has the capacity to make 70,000 litres of fresh water daily for local consumption. So that's going to meet the immediate needs until more help arrives from overseas. The Tongan government also says that it's set up a temporary field hospital on one of the outlying islands that had its medical centre washed away by the tsunami, and some families are now being relocated to the capital of Nuku'alofa because they no longer have anywhere to live. It's far too soon to say that life is returning to normal, but some services are returning in the capital and people have started queuing outside a bank to get some money after a week of chaos. A high-ranking Tongan politician that I've spoken to here in Auckland says that Tonga's recovery from this disaster is going to be long-term, and once the water and emergency supplies are delivered, he says the island nation is going to have to rebuild and it's going to be a long road to recovery. On a sadder note, Pan, the Tongan government has now confirmed that the 2 local victims of the disaster, a 49-year-old woman and a 69-year-old man who were swept away by last weekend's tsunami, have now been buried on the tiny islands where they lived.
Owen, tell us a little bit more about the next stage international relief effort.
Well, in addition to the 2 New Zealand Navy vessels that are already in Tonga, a 3rd ship is on its way with more water and essential supplies, including tarpaulins for shelter and milk powder, so that people have something to eat. Also on board the vessel are 2 helicopters as well as trucks and forklifts that will help distribute aid around the airport and the outlying islands. Ships from the Royal Australian Navy and Britain's Royal Navy are also on their way, and they'll join a US vessel that recently reached Tonga. So the international community is now really pulling together to help out. So far, New Zealand has sent 2 flights with humanitarian aid, including food, water, first aid kits and other safety equipment like masks, and a 3rd aircraft is now being prepared for takeoff within the next day or 2. Nevertheless, a United States coordinator who is on the ground in Tonga says that the resources that they have are not enough and that it's too soon to fully assess the damage to Tonga's economy, Pan.
Thank you very much, our correspondent Owen Poland in New Zealand. Marian Kupu is a journalist with the Tonga Daily News. Here's her latest updates from the country's capital, Nuku'alofa.
I'm currently here in Nuku'alofa, the capital of Tonga. Today is Sunday. On a normal Sunday here in Tonga, we will hear church bells and people going to church. But today, the church services have been cancelled. Church services are now broadcast on the radio. It's very quiet here in Nuku'alofa on a Sunday evening. Members of the basilica behind me came yesterday to clean up the dust. We will keep you updated. I'm Marianne Kupu for CCTV Tonga.
Ms. Kupu also says agriculture has been heavily damaged in Tonga and weather in the coming days could affect relief efforts.
So according to a UN report, fishery and agriculture are the most severely hit industries. So from what you saw, how severe is the damage and how much has been restored?
When we're talking about crops and farm, it was severely damaged due to the dust covering the farms, the yams and the crops in the bush, in the farms, and that's the local food. But imported food, yes, we still managed to survive through with our food. Imported food, we're talking about tin can, corned beef, and tuna and whatnot.
Well, I have checked the weather forecast. There will likely be light showers in the following days and thunderstorm in about a week's time. So how will that affect the relief and cleanup?
Because we haven't have experienced this volcanic eruption, we do not know how the rain and the outcome of the rain with the ashes, where is it going to be sweeping to? Is it going to go underground? We don't know. But to us mentally, just by looking at it, we are sure that it will clear the dust and the ashes around that still on trees and rooftops and everything else on the land. So we're looking forward to heavy rain just to clean up the dust here in Tonga.
Are there any further disasters forecast in the future? And are there any emergency measures in place?
In Tonga, from January, I can say from January to March, that's the hurricane season for Tonga. So every year, we're always looking forward if there's going to be a hurricane or not. So having hurricanes and disasters, nature disasters here in Tonga has become a normal annual thing with us. We were very much aware that there is a live volcano since last year because we have heard noises, explosion from the western side. We have experience of seeing clouds coming up. We have experienced some kind of smell around in the country. If there's going to be another volcano eruption, we do not know. We're hoping there's no more volcanic eruption here in Tonga, and we're hoping like there'll never ever be a volcanic eruption here in Tonga.
For more insight into the situation in Tonga, let's talk to Associate Professor Li Ji in Shanghai. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor. So first, let's talk about the aftermath of those severe geological disasters. How bad is the initial impacts according to your assessment to the country's agriculture and marine sector?
First, I'm very sorry for the farmers and fishermen of Tonga. It's a big disaster. It has been estimated over 85% of the total agricultural household has been affected by this disaster. So the locals, they mainly depend on three agriculture sections. They need to grow crops, they feed livestock, and they do fisheries. So the first challenge is impact the layer of ashes who cover all the whole island and cover all the crops. So that will definitely harm the crops, the livestock. The crops will not grow if they are covered by ash. They cannot breathe, they cannot do photosynthesis, so they need rainfall to wash the ash away. Also, the feed and water for the livestock is also questionable. I mean, even now, there are not enough water and food for the people, so there's not enough water for the crops or livestock. So that's a big trouble. So the second challenge is the tsunami damage on the fisheries. So there's already a huge damage on the fishing boat and the port facilities. And many of the coast reefs and the lagoons, which they do fishing to fisheries, has been damaged and polluted by the waste wash off from the tsunami. So we don't know how soon it will recover. But from the scientific point of view, the volcano could fertilize the region in the long term, since the volcano ashes has a lot of nutrients in it. It has calcium and the phosphates that will keep the soil very fertile in the long term. Also, they will fertilize the ocean. The ocean in this area is very limited by nutrients, so we are expecting algae blooms in the region after the eruption. So, but there's a lot of uncertainty. Anyway, it's a disaster, and the people there need help.
Still focusing on the aftermath, Professor, many scientists have estimated that this could be the strongest volcanic eruption in 3 decades' time on Earth. Do you think there will be ensuing eruptions and seismic activities?
So this volcano eruption, they inject a huge amount of ashes and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. So this will block the sunlight. So the scientists is thinking, there be a temporary cooling effect on the climate. So, but so far up to this 2 weeks research, think this unlikely there is a cooling effect on the planet. Maybe this eruption is just not big enough this time. However, the volcanic activity can trigger a global cooling in the past. So we know there's in time of mass extinction in the ocean 450 million years ago. This caused the loss of about 85% of the species in the ocean. So this is suggested to be caused by a serious volcano activity, which pulling a lot of phosphorus into the world ocean. They fertilize the ocean and they cause algae blooms, and the algae take the carbon dioxide and bury them in the bottom of the ocean. So lead to decrease carbon dioxide in the air, that cooling down the planet. As a scientist, I believe the Tonga volcano provide the opportunity for scientists to monitoring the carbon cycle and the ocean phytoplankton, the algae blooms in the ocean. So because we are looking for engineering solution to cooling down the planet, we worry about the global warming anyway. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Li Ji in Shanghai. Staying with the coverage, telephone lines have been partially restored in Tonga more than a week after the volcanic eruption and tsunami. Many of the island's diaspora are still waiting word from their loved ones. Tony Waterman reports from Texas in the United States, which has one of the largest Tongan communities in the country.
Let me turn my knees.
It's been a week of nonstop trying. And still, Ofa Feva Siale is struggling to make contact with dozens of relatives in her Pacific Island homeland of Tonga.
Nope. No answer.
Her only comfort so far, a short Facebook message from one nephew.
We're all good.
Saying everyone is alive and their homes still standing.
That was a huge relief for us. But of course, the first few days was very scary, very frightening, not knowing, where our families were, how they were, and if they were safe.
But not everyone has been so lucky. Across town at the Cross Life and Hope Church, Pastor Sione Fohala is still waiting to hear from his uncles on the main island, Tonga Tapu. It's been a communications black hole for a week now. The few images that have trickled out show an island blanketed in a thick layer of volcanic ash, trees uprooted and tossed around like matchsticks, homes completely swept into the sea.
It broke my heart. In fact, I was so emotional, kind of look at it, and it made me cry. It's hard for me to imagine, what they are going through in the island.
It will be days before the full extent of the devastation caused by last Saturday's massive underwater volcanic eruption and tsunami is really known. Water, food, and shelter are now top priorities. But Pastor Sione, like so many Tongans living abroad, knows that any help he can offer is limited by the thousands of miles that separate him from his loved ones.
Texas is home to one of the largest Tongan communities in the United States. An estimated 6,000 to 7,000 live here in Euless and surrounding towns. And while many are used to the natural disasters that accompany living along the Pacific Ring of Fire, last week's twin disasters have left many here feeling helpless.
The emotion was raw at a Friday night prayer service at the Free Wesleyan Church of Tonga, where dozens gathered to pray. Many here relieved that the death toll remains low, but worried about the long-term impact of the widespread loss of property and livelihoods.
Right now we are in Texas. That's all I can do, get my people together and pray.
Tongans are known for their close-knit, faithful, and family-oriented culture. This community leaning on each other to rebuild, no matter where they are in the world. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Euless, Texas.
Peru has declared an environmental emergency as an oil spill near Lima keeps spreading. The government said it's planning sustainable management of the 21 beaches that were tarred by 6,000 barrels of oil. A tanker leaked on Saturday last week as it was unloading at a refinery and hit by strong waves created by the volcanic eruption in Tonga. Authorities say 174 hectares of sea, beaches and nature reserves were affected. Crews have been working for days to clean it up. The government is demanding payment of damages from the refinery company, but the Spanish company argues it's not responsible as the government gave no warning.